There are car companies that sell speed. There are luxury brands that sell status. And then there is Ferrari, a name that can turn a single color into a symbol, a mechanical sound into an emotion, and a small factory in northern Italy into one of the most recognizable empires on Earth. Ferrari does not need to build the most cars. It does not need to be the largest manufacturer. Its power comes from something far more difficult to create: desire. For generations, people have dreamed of the red bodywork, the yellow shield, and the black prancing horse. They have watched Ferrari race through tragedy and triumph. They have seen its cars win championships, break records, and become objects worth more than the homes of the people staring at them. But Ferrari was never born as a luxury company. It was born from obsession. Long before the glamorous showrooms, celebrity owners, and multi-million-dollar collector cars, there was Enzo Ferrari, an ambitious, intensely private man who cared more about winning races than pleasing customers. He did not begin with a global brand. He began with cars built by other companies, unstable finances, and a belief that every defeat had to reveal how to win the next time. The road cars came later. They became the financial engine that helped support the competition Enzo truly lived for. Every elegant Grand Tourer, every screaming V12, and every wealthy customer became connected to a far more dangerous world: the racetrack. That world created Ferrari's legend. It also demanded a terrible price. Drivers were killed. Friendships collapsed. Business deals became personal wars. Ford launched an industrial campaign to defeat Ferrari at Le Mans. Fiat became central to the company's future. And when Enzo died, his empire faced a question no machine could answer. Could Ferrari remain Ferrari without him? The answer would transform a racing team into a global luxury powerhouse, one that protects its exclusivity, controls access to its most desirable cars, and sells far more than transportation. Because a Ferrari is not purchased only for where it can take you. It is purchased for what it represents: victory, danger, beauty, scarcity, history. This is the story of a boy from Modena who wanted to race, a company built around competition, and a red empire that taught the world to desire something most people could never have. This is Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari's story began far from the polished showrooms and controlled exclusivity that would one day surround his name. He was born in Modena, Italy, on February 18, 1898, the second son of Alfredo Ferrari and Adalgisa Bisbini. The family lived beside Alfredo's mechanical workshop, where metal parts were produced for the railway industry. Long before Ferrari became a symbol of luxury, the name belonged to a working family surrounded by tools, machinery, heat, and industrial labor. Enzo was not born into the automobile business. At the end of the 19th century, the car was still an experimental machine, expensive, unreliable, and rare. But northern Italy was becoming one of the places where mechanics, manufacturers, and daring drivers were beginning to discover what the automobile could become. In September 1908, when Enzo was 10 years old, his father took him and his older brother to watch a motor race near Bologna. The event left a permanent impression. The machines were loud, exposed, and dangerous. Drivers competed on roads that offered little protection, while mechanical failure was accepted as part of the contest. For a child growing up beside a workshop, racing revealed that engineering could become more than useful. It could become competition. Enzo considered other ambitions, including becoming an opera singer or a sports journalist. But the dream of driving racing cars remained the most powerful. There was no clear path toward it. His family operated a business, but it did not possess the wealth of Italy's great industrial dynasties. Enzo had no advanced engineering degree, no racing organization, and no powerful manufacturer waiting to employ him. Then, in 1916, the structure of his life collapsed. His father and older brother both died within months of each other. The family business could not continue as before, and Enzo was forced to abandon his studies and search for work. At 18, he was no longer simply imagining a future in racing. He had become responsible for helping his family survive. Europe was also being consumed by war. Italy had entered the First World War in 1915, and Enzo was eventually drafted into the Royal Italian Army. He served with the 3rd Alpine Artillery Regiment. Among his duties was caring for and shoeing the mules used to move artillery through difficult terrain. It was physical, exhausting service in a conflict defined by disease and mass death. Before Enzo could build a career, the war threatened to end his life. He became seriously ill, underwent 2 operations, and was discharged from military service. When he returned to civilian life, he had lost his father, his brother, the security of the family workshop, and the direction that had once seemed possible. The future founder of Ferrari entered the post-war world with almost nothing. Italy's economy was damaged. Returning soldiers competed for work, and opportunities in the young automobile industry were limited. Enzo recovered and traveled to Turin, the center of Italian car manufacturing, hoping to work for Fiat. Fiat rejected him. For someone who had dreamed of automobiles since childhood, the refusal could have closed the only door that seemed to matter. Enzo had neither the credentials nor the connections that made entry into the industry easy. But he did not return to Modena and abandon the idea. Near the end of 1918, he found work in Turin with a small company that rebuilt truck chassis and fitted them with torpedo-style passenger bodies. The job was modest, but it placed him inside the automobile trade at a time when simply gaining access mattered. He was beginning at the bottom, not as a designer, an executive, or a celebrated driver. He was learning how machines were repaired, tested, sold, and kept running in a country recovering from war. In 1919, Enzo moved to Milan and joined Costruzioni Meccaniche Nazionali, better known as CMN. He first worked as a test driver. That role finally placed him behind the wheel, evaluating machines rather than watching them from the roadside. Soon, CMN offered him the opportunity he had imagined since the race near Bologna. Enzo Ferrari would compete. His racing debut came in the Parma Poggio di Berceto hill climb in 1919. He was not entering as the leader of a great team. He was an unknown young driver in a machine that could not match the resources of Italy's strongest manufacturers. He did not dominate the event, but the result mattered less than the transition it represented. The boy who had watched racing from behind the crowd was now part of the race itself. The bereaved former soldier who had been rejected by Fiat had found a narrow entrance into the world he refused to leave. He still had no company. There was no prancing horse, no red empire, and no factory in Maranello. But Enzo Ferrari had reached the starting line. Enzo Ferrari entered the 1920s as a driver searching for a future. He would leave the decade as something far more important. In 1920, he joined Alfa Romeo for the Targa Florio, one of Europe's most punishing road races. The course crossed the mountains of Sicily on narrow public roads, where dust, mechanical failure, and exhaustion could end a race without warning. Ferrari finished second overall and first in his class. The result established his place inside Alfa Romeo, a company becoming one of Italy's great symbols of speed and engineering. It gave him access to machines, mechanics, and competition at a level an independent driver could never create alone. Enzo raced for Alfa through the 1920s, but he studied more than driving. He watched how cars were prepared, how drivers were selected, how sponsors were handled, and how relationships could become resources. Victory, he learned, depended on an entire system behind the person at the wheel. His most important early win came on June 17, 1923, at the Circuito del Savio near Ravenna. After the race, Ferrari met the family of Francesco Baracca, the celebrated Italian fighter pilot killed during the First World War. Baracca had carried a black prancing horse on his aircraft. According to Enzo's later account, Countess Paolina Baracca suggested that he place her son's horse on his racing cars for good fortune. The emblem did not appear immediately, but the encounter gave Ferrari a symbol that would eventually become more famous than any individual car carrying it. Enzo continued racing and won the Coppa Acerbo in 1924. Yet his ambitions were moving beyond his own performance. Ferrari was not the greatest natural driver of his generation. His exceptional ability was recognizing talent, attracting financial support, building relationships, and organizing people around competition. He increasingly connected Alfa Romeo with wealthy private drivers who wanted to race its cars. These gentleman drivers had money and ambition, but often lacked factory-level preparation. Alfa Romeo had competitive machinery, but could not manage every private entrant. Enzo Ferrari could connect the two. On November 16, 1929, Società Anonima, Scuderia Ferrari was formally established in Modena. Its stated purpose was not to manufacture Ferrari automobiles. It was to purchase Alfa Romeo racing cars and enter them in competition. The company brought together Enzo, investors Alfredo and Augusto Caniato, driver Mario Tadini, Ferruccio Testi, and the involvement of Alfa Romeo and Pirelli. Ferrari was its driving force, but the organization was built through partnerships. Its model was practical. Customers could supply money, cars, or both. The Scuderia provided preparation, logistics, mechanics, and professional drivers. The first event entered by Scuderia Ferrari was the 1930 Mille Miglia. The team did not build its own cars. Its mechanics prepared Alfa Romeos, and its drivers competed under the name of the man organizing them. Ferrari existed first as a racing team, not as a manufacturer. Enzo still drove occasionally, but his future was becoming clear. He could recruit men such as Tazio Nuvolari, one of the era's greatest drivers, and place them inside a structure designed to win. After finishing second in a race in August 1931, Enzo retired from competitive driving as the birth of his first son, Alfredo, known as Dino, approached. From then on, he would experience racing from the workshop, the office, and the pit wall. In 1932, the black prancing horse finally appeared on cars entered by Scuderia Ferrari. Its debut came at the 24 Hours of Spa, displayed on Alfa Romeo 8C 2300S, prepared by the team. Scuderia Ferrari finished first and second. Enzo placed the black horse against a yellow background, the color of Modena. It was not yet the badge of a Ferrari-built automobile because no such automobile existed. It represented a racing organization using Alfa Romeo machinery, but the identity was becoming distinct. As economic pressure forced Alfa Romeo to reduce its direct racing involvement, Scuderia Ferrari assumed a larger role. The relationship gave Enzo influence, but it also created dependence. His success relied on Alfa Romeo's engineering, engines, and cars. The Ferrari name was becoming known across European motorsport, yet the machines beneath the prancing horse belonged to another manufacturer. The Scuderia entered the Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, Grand Prix races, endurance events, and hill climbs. It managed professional stars and private customers, and even competed in motorcycle racing for several seasons. Enzo developed a demanding culture. Mechanical failure was not simply defeat, it was information. A victory could be celebrated briefly, but the next race immediately became more important. By the middle of the 1930s, Scuderia Ferrari was carrying much of Alfa Romeo's competition program. Then Alfa Romeo decided to reclaim control. In 1938, the manufacturer brought its racing operations back in-house and created Alfa Corse. Enzo was appointed to manage the new department, while the independent Scuderia Ferrari structure was absorbed into the company. On paper, it was a promotion. In reality, Ferrari now answered to corporate authority after years of controlling his own organization. The partnership that had created his career was approaching its end. In 1939, after nearly 2 decades connected to Alfa Romeo, Enzo Ferrari walked away. He still had not built a car bearing his name, but he had learned how to assemble a team, attract money, manage great drivers, create an identity, and turn obsession into an institution. Now he would have to build the machine itself. When Enzo Ferrari left Alfa Romeo in 1939, he walked away from the company that had given him nearly everything. Alfa had supplied the cars, engineers, reputation, and machinery behind Scuderia Ferrari. For almost 2 decades, Enzo had learned how to race, organize, negotiate, and survive inside its world. Now he had his independence. But independence came with restrictions. Under the terms surrounding his departure, Ferrari could not immediately use his own name on a competing automobile. The man whose surname was already known across European racing could build machines, but he could not yet sell a car as a Ferrari, so he created a new company in Modena. It was called Auto Costruzioni. The business produced machine tools and mechanical components. It developed relationships with aviation and industrial companies and manufactured equipment that could generate revenue outside motorsport. But Enzo had not left Alfa Romeo to forget racing. In late 1939, a new opportunity arrived. Lotario Rangoni Machiavelli and driver Alberto Ascari wanted cars for the 1940 edition of the Mille Miglia. Auto Costruzioni began work on 2 machines. They were called the 815. The name described the engineering, 8 cylinders, and approximately 1.5 liters of displacement. Their straight 8 engines used Fiat-derived components, while Carrozzeria Touring produced lightweight open 2-seat bodies. The cars did not carry the Ferrari name. They could not. Yet the 815 was the first automobile built under Enzo Ferrari's independent direction. It was the bridge between the Alfa Romeo years and the company that had not yet officially been born. Both cars entered the Mille Miglia on April 28, 1940. Alberto Ascari drove one with Giovanni Minozzi, while Rangoni Machiavelli shared the other with Enrico Nardi. For a time, the new machines showed promise. Neither finished. Mechanical failures ended both races, leaving Enzo with no victory and little opportunity to correct the weaknesses. Weeks later, Italy entered the Second World War. European motorsport largely stopped, and Auto Costruzioni concentrated on machine tools, particularly grinding machines used to produce precision components and bearings. The war did not simply delay Enzo's plans. It transformed the company around them. In late 1943, Ferrari moved operations from Modena to Maranello. The new location offered space for a larger factory. Maranello would eventually become inseparable from Ferrari. At the time, however, it was a wartime industrial site. The new factory was not safe from the war. Allied bombing struck the Maranello plant in November 1944, and it was attacked again in February 1945. Buildings and equipment were damaged. Production was disrupted. Italy was collapsing around it. Yet Enzo continued planning for the world that would follow the war. He understood that when racing returned, he could no longer depend on another manufacturer's cars. If his name was going to survive, it would need its own engine, chassis, and identity. After the war, the damaged factory was rebuilt and expanded. Machine tool production had kept the company alive, but it was no longer the final purpose. Enzo Ferrari was ready to build the car that Alfa Romeo had once made unnecessary. For the engine, he turned to Gioacchino Colombo, an engineer he knew from the Alfa years. Ferrari wanted a 12-cylinder design despite the company's limited size and resources. A V12 was complicated and expensive, but its architecture could be developed for different forms of racing and eventually for road cars. Colombo designed the compact 1.5-liter engine with important contributions from Giuseppe Busso and Luigi Bazzi. The first Ferrari would be small in displacement, but enormous in ambition. Its name was the 125S. The number referred to the approximate displacement of each cylinder. 12 cylinders multiplied by roughly 125 cubic centimeters produced an engine of about 1.5 liters. The car used a tubular steel chassis and carried the prancing horse that had previously appeared on Alfa Romeos entered by Scuderia Ferrari. This time, the badge represented the manufacturer of the machine itself. On March 12, 1947, the unfinished 125S came alive inside the Maranello factory. Its V12 was started while the car was still essentially an unbodied rolling chassis. For the first time, an automobile powered by a Ferrari engine and built under the Ferrari name moved through the factory gates. The company's official history begins with that moment. But Enzo did not build the 125S simply to exist. He built it to compete. On May 11, 1947, Franco Cortese drove the car in its first race at Piacenza. The new Ferrari led before a fuel pump problem forced it to retire. Enzo called the result a promising failure. 9 days later, Cortese entered the 125S in the Rome Grand Prix at the Terme di Caracalla circuit. This time, the machine survived. After 40 laps, Ferrari achieved its first victory. The result did not yet create a global luxury brand. There were no international showrooms, waiting lists, or collectors competing for limited production. There was only a rebuilt factory, a tiny V12, and a racing car created by a man who had spent 8 years waiting to put his own name on the machine. Ferrari had finally become more than a team. It had become a manufacturer. Ferrari entered 1948 with a victory behind it, but almost no certainty ahead. The company was still small. Its cars were built in limited numbers, often by hand, and racing consumed money faster than success could replace it. Enzo Ferrari needed victories to make the name valuable and customers to keep the racing team alive. The solution was a car that could do both. In 1948, Ferrari introduced the 166mm. The number referred to the approximate displacement of each of its 12 cylinders. The letter stood for Mille Miglia, the road race it was created to conquer. Its lightweight open body, built by Touring of Milan, became known as the Barchetta, the little boat. The 166mm was elegant enough to attract wealthy owners, but engineered for endurance competition. That combination would become central to Ferrari's future. A customer was not simply buying speed. He was buying a connection to the machines competing under the same name. In April 1949, Clemente Biondetti and Ettore Solani drove a 166mm to victory in the Mille Miglia. 2 months later, Ferrari entered the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the first time. The race demanded speed, reliability, and survival through an entire day and night. Established manufacturers had greater resources and more experience. Ferrari had been building cars under its own name for only 2 years. The number 22 Ferrari was shared by Luigi Chinetti and Lord Selsdon. Selsdon drove only a short portion of the race. Chinetti remained behind the wheel for more than 23 hours, protecting the car while competitors failed around him. On June 26, 1949, Ferrari won Le Mans on its first attempt. The victory changed how the young company was seen. Ferrari was no longer merely an ambitious Italian workshop. It had defeated the world on endurance racing's most important stage. Chinetti also helped open another road to survival. With strong connections in the United States, he understood that wealthy American enthusiasts wanted rare European sports cars proven in competition. He became one of Ferrari's most important early distributors, helping turn American money into fuel for Maranello's racing ambitions. Enzo's business model was taking shape. Road cars were not separate from racing. They were its financial support system. Victories created desire, and desire persuaded customers to finance the next attempt at victory. In 1950, the Formula One World Championship began. Ferrari entered at the second round in Monaco, where Alberto Ascari finished second, but Alfa Romeo dominated the early championship. For Enzo, the rivalry was personal. Alfa Romeo had created his career. Its cars had once competed beneath the Scuderia Ferrari name. Now the company that had been his teacher was the opponent he most wanted to defeat. Ferrari developed the 375 F1, powered by a large, naturally aspirated V12. Alfa Romeo relied on fast but fuel-hungry supercharged engines. At the British Grand Prix on July 14, 1951, José Froilán González placed the Ferrari on pole position at Silverstone and defeated the Alfa Romeos of Juan Manuel Fangio and Giuseppe Farina. It was Ferrari's first Formula One World Championship victory. Enzo later compared the emotion to killing his own mother. The remark captured the contradiction. Defeating Alfa proved Ferrari's independence, but it also meant overcoming the institution that had made his rise possible. Ferrari came close to the Drivers' Championship in 1951, but Fangio secured the title at the final race. The following season, the balance of power changed completely. Formula One adopted Formula Two regulations for the World Championship, and Ferrari's 500 F2 became the defining car of the era. It used a compact four-cylinder engine developed under Aurelio Lampredi rather than a V12. Alberto Ascari missed the opening championship round while competing in the Indianapolis 500. After returning to Europe, he won every World Championship Grand Prix he entered during the rest of 1952. At Monza, Ascari became Ferrari's first Formula One World Champion. He repeated the achievement in 1953, giving Ferrari and Italy 2 consecutive drivers' titles. His victories established the Scuderia as the dominant force in Grand Prix racing. Ferrari was also expanding beyond Formula One. In 1953, the FIA introduced the World Sports Car Championship. Ferrari won the inaugural manufacturer's title, proving that its strength extended across endurance racing as well as single-seaters. Meanwhile, the road car business was becoming more organized. In 1951, Enzo began the partnership with Battista Pininfarina that would define Ferrari design for generations. Enzo supplied the mechanical character. Pininfarina helped give it a recognizable visual language. The most important model family to emerge was 250. The 250 mm appeared in 1953, followed by the 250 Europa, and in 1954 the 250 GT Coupe. The 250 GT represented Ferrari's first serious attempt to standardize a model for customers who wanted high performance without entering a race. Production remained limited, but Ferrari was becoming a true automobile company. The road cars grew more refined, the racing cars grew more successful. Each side strengthened the other. By 1956, Juan Manuel Fangio had joined Ferrari and won the Formula One World Championship in the Lancia-derived D50. Maranello now had world titles, international customers, a defining design partner, and a family of road cars whose desirability was built on competition. The formula appeared unstoppable. Win on Sunday, create desire on Monday, sell enough cars to return to the track. But behind the victories, Enzo Ferrari's private world was beginning to collapse. For Enzo Ferrari, victory had always carried a cost. By the middle of the 1950s, Ferrari had become a world champion, a winner at Le Mans, and one of the most desired names in European motoring. Yet the company remained small enough that every racing program, engine failure, and damaged car mattered. Then, the greatest loss of Enzo's life arrived far from the racetrack. His son Alfredo Ferrari, known to everyone as Dino, had been prepared for a future inside the company. He studied engineering and worked closely with Ferrari's technical staff, especially on the development of a new V6 racing engine. Dino represented more than succession. He was the person who might one day unite Enzo's family name with the company Enzo had built around it. But Dino suffered from a progressive illness that steadily weakened his body. Enzo searched for doctors, monitored treatments, and remained deeply involved as his son's condition worsened. On June 30th, 1956, Dino Ferrari died at the age of 24. The loss changed Enzo. He continued going to the factory and continued demanding victories, but those around him saw a man becoming more isolated. Dino's portrait remained in Enzo's office. In later years, Enzo regularly visited his son's grave in Modena. The work Dino had helped inspire did not disappear. Engineer Vittorio Giano continued developing the compact V6, and Ferrari named the engine, and later an entire family of racing and road cars, Dino. The name became a memorial built from machinery. But in 1957, grief was followed by catastrophe. The season began with another death. On March 14th, Eugenio Castellotti, one of Italy's most celebrated young drivers and the winner of the previous year's Mille Miglia, was killed during a private Ferrari test at the Modena circuit. The danger surrounding Ferrari was no longer abstract. Its cars were becoming faster. The roads and circuits had not become safer at the same rate. Still, the Mille Miglia remained one of the most important events in Italy. The 1,000-mile race ran from Brescia to Rome and back across public roads, through towns, mountain passes, and open countryside. Spectators stood only feet from the cars. Ferrari had dominated the event for years, and Enzo entered the 1957 edition with powerful machinery and a formidable group of drivers. Piero Taruffi drove a Ferrari 315S. Peter Collins and Wolfgang von Trips were also part of the factory effort. Alfonso de Portago, a Spanish aristocrat known for his confidence and appetite for risk, entered a Ferrari 335S with American navigator Edmund Nelson. On May 12th, Taruffi completed the route first. At 50 years old, after many unsuccessful attempts, he finally won the Mille Miglia. He had promised his wife that victory would be the end of his racing career. Under ordinary circumstances, it would have been a perfect Ferrari story. But the race had already become a national tragedy. Near the village of Guidizzolo, De Portago's car suffered a tire failure while traveling at enormous speed. The Ferrari left the road and struck spectators gathered along the course. De Portago and Nelson were killed. 9 spectators also lost their lives. Ferrari had won the race, but there could be no celebration. Images of the wreckage spread across Italy. Newspapers demanded answers. Critics attacked the existence of high-speed races on public roads and questioned the responsibility of manufacturers that built increasingly powerful cars for them. The competitive Mille Miglia was never held again. For Enzo, the consequences became personal and legal. Prosecutors investigated whether Ferrari and the tire manufacturer bore responsibility for the disaster. Enzo faced accusations that the car's equipment had been unsuitable for the forces and speeds involved. Technical experts disagreed over the cause of the failure. The legal proceedings continued for years before Ferrari was ultimately cleared. But an acquittal could not erase the damage. The company's name was now connected not only with victory, beauty, and Italian ambition, but also with the human cost of motorsport. Enzo's public image hardened. To supporters, he was the uncompromising leader of a team competing in an age when every driver understood the danger. To critics, he was a manufacturer whose hunger for victory had outrun his willingness to accept responsibility. Both interpretations followed him for the rest of his life. Inside Maranello, however, the work continued. The Dino V6 began racing in 1957, carrying the name of the son Enzo had lost. The engine would evolve through single-seaters, sports cars, and eventually some of the most important road cars in Ferrari history. That contrast defined the company. Grief produced an engine. A victory became a disaster. A race that had helped create Ferrari's reputation was ended by a Ferrari crash. By the close of 1957, the prancing horse had survived the death of Enzo's son, the loss of one of Italy's finest drivers, public condemnation, and the beginning of a criminal case. Ferrari was still standing, but its legend would never again be innocent. By the end of the 1950s, Ferrari had survived grief, investigation, and public condemnation. It had also become more dangerous to its rivals than ever. In 1958, Mike Hawthorne won the Formula One World Championship for Ferrari. The title confirmed that Maranello could still defeat larger manufacturers while its founder faced legal pressure at home. In endurance racing, Ferrari's power became even clearer. Phil Hill and Olivier Gendebien won the 1958 24 Hours of Le Mans in a 250 Testarossa, beginning one of the greatest periods of dominance in the race's history. Ferrari won Le Mans again in 1960, then again in 1961, and again in 1962. The cars evolved from front-engined Testarossas to mid-engined prototypes, but the principle remained the same: light construction, sophisticated engines, and an organization that understood endurance racing better than almost anyone else. At the same time, Ferrari was creating the purest expression of its early road car philosophy. The 250 GTO was unveiled in 1962. It used the proven 250 GT foundation and a 3-liter V12, but its body was shaped through extensive aerodynamic development. The long nose reduced front lift. A rear spoiler improved stability at speed. It was technically a road car, but every element of it existed to win. The project began under engineer Giotto Bizzarini. Before it was completed, however, Ferrari suffered one of the most serious internal revolts in its history. In late 1961, several senior managers and engineers left after a confrontation with Enzo. The departures removed important figures from both the technical and commercial sides of the company. A younger generation was suddenly forced forward. Mauro Forghieri, still in his 20s, became one of Ferrari's central engineers. Sergio Scaglietti helped refine the GTO's body. The crisis could have weakened Maranello for years. Instead, the 250 GTO won its class at major events and helped Ferrari secure 3 consecutive world championships for GT manufacturers from 1962 through 1964. Only a small number were built. Scarcity was not yet a carefully managed luxury strategy. It resulted partly from limited production, continuous development, and Enzo's willingness to decide who could buy his most important cars. But the effect was already powerful. The harder a Ferrari was to obtain, the more people wanted one. By 1963, that desire attracted one of the largest industrial companies in the world. Ford Motor Company wanted international motorsport to strengthen its image. Ferrari already possessed what Ford could not create quickly: victories, European glamour, engineering credibility, and authority at Le Mans. Negotiations began over a possible agreement. Outside capital could strengthen Ferrari's factory and racing program, but control became the central issue. Enzo wanted authority over motorsport. Ford would not finance a racing operation it could not control. On May 22, 1963, the companies announced that negotiations had been suspended. The deal was dead. What followed became one of the most expensive acts of retaliation in automotive history. Ford created a dedicated program with a direct objective: build a car capable of defeating Ferrari at Le Mans. The result was the GT40. Ford recruited expertise from both sides of the Atlantic: Roy Lunn, Eric Broadley, John Wyer, Carroll Shelby, and drivers including Bruce McLaren and Ken Miles helped transform corporate resources into an endurance racer. The first GT40S were extremely fast. They were also fragile. At Le Mans in 1964, Ford demonstrated its speed, but all three factory GT40S retired. Ferrari filled the podium and won with Jean Guichet and Nino Vaccarella in a 275p. Ford returned in 1965 with more power and greater ambition. Again, its leading cars failed. Ferrari's factory prototypes also encountered trouble, leaving victory to the privately entered North American racing team 250 LM of Jochen Rindt and Maston Gregory, supported by Luigi Cinetti's organization. It was Ferrari's sixth consecutive Le Mans victory. It was also its last overall victory there for nearly 6 decades. Ford treated every failure as engineering data. The company reorganized the program, expanded testing, strengthened the GT40, and developed the 7-liter Mark II. The effort involved multiple race teams, extensive dynamometer work, improved brakes, and an industrial-scale Ferrari could not match. At Le Mans in June 1966, Ford arrived with an army. Ferrari brought the advanced 330P3, but the balance of power had changed. During the night, the Ferraris retired with mechanical problems. Ford continued. When the race ended, 3 GT40 Mark IIs crossed the line together. Bruce McLaren and Chris Amon were declared the winners, with Ken Miles and Denny Hulme second. Ford had not merely defeated Ferrari, it had occupied the entire podium. Ferrari answered with a dramatic 1-2-3 finish at Daytona in 1967, its cars crossing the line together on Ford's home ground. But Le Mans belonged to Ford from 1966 through 1969. For Ferrari, the war exposed a structural truth. Enzo could defeat giant corporations through experience, speed, and ingenuity. He could not finance every battle alone forever. Road car production was expanding, regulations were changing, and modern racing demanded larger technical budgets. Ferrari needed a partner with industrial strength, but one that would preserve the identity Enzo had created. This time, the partner came from Italy. On June 21, 1969, it was announced that Fiat had purchased 50% of Ferrari. The investment gave Maranello industrial support, while Enzo remained the defining authority over the racing organization and the company bearing his name. Ferrari had rejected an American empire. Now it had joined an Italian one. The company remained independent in spirit, but it would never again be the small, isolated manufacturer that had entered Le Mans in 1949. To survive the future, Ferrari had surrendered part of itself. The partnership with Fiat gave Ferrari money, industrial support, and a path toward larger production. It did not immediately give the company peace. The early 1970s exposed a contradiction at the center of Maranello. Ferrari was now backed by one of Europe's largest industrial groups, yet its racing operations still behaved like the personal kingdom of Enzo Ferrari. For decades, Ferrari had fought in almost every major form of motorsport. That was becoming impossible. In 1972, the Ferrari 312 PB dominated the World Championship for makes. The factory team won every championship race it entered and secured the title with a flat 12 prototype that represented the final evolution of Ferrari's great sports racing tradition. The following season was very different. Ferrari failed to win a Formula One Grand Prix in 1973. At Le Mans, the 312 PBs were defeated by Matra. The company was dividing its engineers, money, and attention across too many battles. Enzo made a painful decision. After the 1973 season, Ferrari ended its factory participation in top-level sports car racing and concentrated its resources on Formula One. The company that had built its reputation at Le Mans was walking away from the race, but the Formula One team itself needed to be rebuilt. In 1973, Enzo brought a young Luca di Montezemolo into the organization. Still in his 20s, Montezemolo understood communication, politics, and the importance of creating order around powerful personalities. Mauro Forghieri returned to a central technical role. Clay Regazzoni came back as a driver and recommended a young Austrian who had impressed him at BRM. His name was Niki Lauda. Lauda was analytical, direct, and sometimes brutally honest. He studied data, tested relentlessly, and told the engineers exactly what he believed was wrong with the car. Enzo respected courage, but he also respected results. In 1974, Ferrari returned to competitiveness. Lauda won in Spain and the Netherlands. Regazzoni won in Germany and fought for the championship until the final race. Then, Forghieri produced the car that changed everything. The Ferrari 312T retained the team's flat 12 engine, but introduced a transverse gearbox mounted across the car. The arrangement improved weight distribution and helped make the machine more compact and balanced. The letter T stood for trasversale. Once Ferrari understood the car, Lauda began winning. In 1975, he took victories in Monaco, Belgium, Sweden, France, and the United States. At Monza, third place secured the Drivers' Championship, while Regazzoni won the race before the Italian crowd. Ferrari also won the Constructors' Championship. 11 years had passed since the team's previous Formula One titles. Maranello was again at the center of the sport. The revival arrived as Ferrari's road car identity was also changing. The 365 GT4BB placed a flat 12 engine behind the occupants, abandoning the traditional front-engined layout of Ferrari's great Grand Tourers. The Dyno 308 GT4, introduced in 1973, became Ferrari's first production road car powered by a V8. Its baritone body also broke with the company's long relationship with Pininfarina. Then came the Pininfarina-designed 308 GTB in 1975. Compact and mid-engined, it established a mechanical and visual formula that would influence Ferrari's V8 road cars for decades. These models appeared during the oil crisis when fuel prices and economic uncertainty threatened the market for large performance cars. Ferrari responded not by abandoning speed, but by offering it in new forms. On the track, however, the new golden era nearly ended in fire. On August 1, 1976, Lauda crashed at the Nürburgring during the German Grand Prix. His Ferrari struck the barriers and caught fire. Other drivers stopped and helped pull him from the wreckage. Lauda suffered severe burns and lung damage. Only 6 weeks later, still visibly injured, he returned at Monza and finished fourth. The championship fight continued to the final round in Japan. Heavy rain made the Fuji circuit extremely dangerous. Lauda withdrew after the opening laps, deciding that the conditions were not worth the risk. James Hunt won the championship by 1 point. Some inside Ferrari viewed Lauda's decision as a failure of loyalty. Lauda viewed it as the judgment of a man who had already nearly died for the title. The relationship between driver and team never fully recovered. Yet in 1977, Lauda delivered Ferrari another world championship through consistency, intelligence, and control. He secured the title before the season ended and then left the team. Ferrari had regained its dominance but lost the driver who had helped restore it. The 312T family continued winning without him. In 1979, Jody Scheckter joined Ferrari and drove the ground effect 312 T4. With Gilles Villeneuve as his teammate, Scheckter secured the Drivers' Championship at Monza, while Ferrari won another Constructors' title. Villeneuve became the emotional opposite of Lauda. Where Lauda calculated, Villeneuve attacked. He drove with visible aggression, accepted enormous risks, and became one of the most beloved drivers in Ferrari history. By the end of the decade, Ferrari had survived industrial expansion, the abandonment of sports car racing, an oil crisis, and a complete Formula One reconstruction. It had also learned a lesson that would define its future. Ferrari could no longer compete everywhere. To remain the symbol of racing, it had to choose the battlefield that mattered most. The 1980 season was one of the worst in Ferrari's Formula One history. Only a year earlier, Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve had finished first and second in the championship. Now the 3-1-2 T5 was slow, unreliable, and unable to defend either title. Scheckter failed to qualify for the Canadian Grand Prix and retired at the end of the season. Ferrari had reached the limit of the Flat 12 era. The future belonged to turbocharging. Mauro Forghieri's engineers developed a compact 1.5-liter V6 turbo engine for the new one, 26CK. The car was difficult to control and suffered from severe turbo lag, but its power was unmistakable. Villeneuve made the machine look better than it was. In 1981, he won in Monaco, holding off faster-handling rivals through the narrow streets. 2 weeks later, he won again at Jarama, defending against a line of cars for lap after lap. His driving became part of Ferrari's identity. Villeneuve was fearless, spectacular, and emotionally connected to the Tifosi. Enzo saw in him the kind of competitor he had always admired, a driver willing to fight even when the machine was imperfect. But in 1982, that loyalty was broken. At the San Marino Grand Prix, Villeneuve and Didier Pironi were leading after their main rivals retired. Ferrari displayed a pit signal, instructing the drivers to slow down and conserve fuel. Villeneuve believed the order meant they should hold position. Pironi passed him and won. Villeneuve felt betrayed. He vowed never to speak to his teammate again. 2 weeks later, during qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix at Zolder, Villeneuve collided with a slower car and was thrown from his Ferrari. He died on May 8, 1982. He was 32. The loss devastated Ferrari and its supporters. Enzo had buried drivers before, but Villeneuve's death was especially personal. He later described the Canadian as a son. The season continued. Pironi won in the Netherlands and built a strong championship lead. Then, during wet practice for the German Grand Prix, he struck the back of another car and suffered devastating leg injuries. His Formula One career was over. Ferrari had lost one driver and nearly lost another, yet the 126C2 was fast enough to win the Constructors' Championship. Patrick Tambay and Mario Andretti helped complete a Title I in the shadow of tragedy. Ferrari repeated the Constructors' triumph in 1983. But a driver's championship remained out of reach. René Arnoux challenged for the title, while Patrick Tambay won at Imola before an emotional Italian crowd. The team had recovered technically, but the stability of the Lauda era was gone. Away from Formula One, Ferrari was redefining what a road car could represent. Its production models were becoming more visible across the world. They appeared in magazines, films, music videos, and the expanding culture of celebrity wealth. In 1984, Ferrari unveiled the Testarossa at the Paris Motor Show. Its wide body, flat 12 engine, and dramatic side strakes made it one of the defining automobiles of the decade. The name revived a historic Ferrari designation, but the car belonged unmistakably to the 1980s. That same year, Ferrari launched something even more extreme. Officially, it was called the GTO. Enthusiasts would know it as the 288 GTO. It was created for the FIA's Group B category and used a twin-turbocharged V8 mounted longitudinally behind the cockpit. Its body resembled the 308 GTB, but beneath the surface, it was a far more specialized machine. The planned racing program never developed as intended. Group B was canceled before the GTO could establish the competition, career for which it had been designed. Yet the car created a new category inside Ferrari. It was a limited, technologically advanced supercar whose rarity became part of its power. The GTO Evoluzione pushed the concept further, combining lightweight composite construction with extreme turbocharged performance. Enzo wanted a road car that captured that aggression without apology. The result was the F40. Introduced in 1987 to celebrate 40 years of Ferrari automobile production, the F40 was stripped of unnecessary luxury. Its twin-turbo V8 sat beneath a transparent engine cover. Its body used advanced composite materials. The cabin was loud, sparse, and focused. Ferrari claimed a top speed of 324 kilometers per hour, just over 200 miles per hour. But the numbers alone did not explain the car. The F40 felt like a final statement from its founder. Enzo was almost 90 years old. He rarely appeared in public, and the modern company around him was increasingly managed by executives, engineers, and the Fiat organization. Yet the F40 still carried his philosophy: reduce comfort, reduce weight, increase speed, make the driver earn the experience. It was the last road car personally commissioned and approved by Enzo Ferrari, and the last new Ferrari presented to the public in his presence. On August 14, 1988, Enzo Ferrari died at his home in Modena. He was 90 years old. The announcement was made only after his burial, in accordance with his wishes. Weeks later, Formula One arrived at Monza. McLaren had won every race of the season so far, and Ferrari was not expected to challenge its dominance. Then both McLarens failed to finish. Gerhard Berger led Michele Alboreto across the line in a Ferrari 1-2 victory. It was the only race McLaren lost in 1988. For the Tifosi, the result felt like a farewell arranged by fate. Enzo Ferrari had spent his life turning competition into identity. Now the company had to discover whether that identity could survive without him. After Enzo Ferrari's death, the company did not immediately become stronger. It became uncertain. Ferrari still possessed one of the most famous names in the world, but its Formula One operation entered the 1990s without clear direction. Managers changed. Technical departments argued. Cars were created by groups that did not always work as one organization. In 1990, Alain Prost brought Ferrari close to the Drivers' Championship. He won 5 races and arrived at the decisive battle, still capable of taking the title. But the opportunity disappeared in a first-corner collision with Ayrton Senna at Suzuka. The following season exposed deeper problems. Ferrari failed to win a race in 1991. Prost publicly criticized the car and was dismissed before the final Grand Prix. The Scuderia that had once terrified its rivals appeared divided and trapped by its own history. At the end of that year, Luca di Montezemolo returned to Ferrari as chairman and chief executive. He had helped rebuild the Formula One team during the Lauda era. Now his task was larger. Ferrari needed to become modern without becoming ordinary. Montezemolo reorganized the road car business, improved quality, and restored discipline to the racing team. In 1993, he appointed Jean Todt to lead the Scuderia. Todt came from Peugeot's successful motorsport operation with a reputation for organization and patience. He was not part of Ferrari's internal factions. The decision was controversial. But Ferrari no longer needed another romantic figure. It needed a system. The first breakthrough came in 1994 when Gerhard Berger won the German Grand Prix. It was Ferrari's first Formula One victory in almost 4 years. Then Ferrari made the most important driver signing in its modern history. Michael Schumacher had won the 1994 and 1995 World Championships with Benetton. He was leaving a championship team to join one that had not produced a driver's champion since 1979. He arrived in 1996. The Ferrari F310 was powerful, but awkward and unreliable. Schumacher still won 3 races, including a masterful drive through heavy rain in Spain. Those victories changed expectations. Ferrari was no longer asking whether it could win again. It was asking how long the transformation would take. Schumacher became more than a driver. He tested relentlessly at Fiorano, worked directly with engineers, and demanded the same concentration from everyone around him. Jean Todt built the organization around that standard. In 1997, Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne joined Ferrari after helping Schumacher win his Benetton titles. Brawn brought strategic discipline. Byrne led the design group. Paolo Martinelli directed the engine department. The pieces were finally together. But progress came with painful failures. Schumacher entered the final race of 1997, leading Jacques Villeneuve by 1 point. Their cars collided at Jerez, and Schumacher was later removed from the championship classification. In 1998, Ferrari again reached the final round with a chance to defeat McLaren and Mika Häkkinen. Again, the title escaped. In 1999, Schumacher broke his leg at Silverstone and missed 6 races. Eddie Irvine carried Ferrari's challenge to the final Grand Prix, but lost the Drivers' Championship to Häkkinen. Yet Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship. It was the team's first since 1983. The machine was ready. Only the final result remained. The 2000 season became a duel between Schumacher and Häkkinen. Ferrari began strongly, struggled during the middle of the year, and arrived in Japan with the championship still undecided. At Suzuka, the two drivers raced far ahead of the field. Ferrari used a faster final pit stop to return Schumacher to the track in the lead. He won. For the first time in 21 years, a Ferrari driver was world champion. Mechanics cried in the garage. Tifosi celebrated across Italy. Schumacher wept as the meaning of the result reached him. But the title was not the end of Ferrari's rise. It was the beginning of domination. Schumacher won again in 2001, then in 2002, then in 2003, and again in 2004. 5 consecutive Drivers' Championships. Ferrari also won 6 consecutive Constructors' Championships from 1999 through 2004. In 2004, it won 15 of 18 Grand Prix, including 13 victories for Schumacher. The company had achieved something Enzo had pursued his entire life. Not one heroic driver. Not one brilliant car. A repeatable system for winning. That philosophy also reshaped Ferrari's road cars. The F50 used a naturally aspirated V12 developed from Formula One technology. The 360 Modena introduced an aluminum chassis and modern production methods. In 2002, Ferrari unveiled the Enzo, a limited supercar named for the founder and filled with technology influenced by the dominant racing program: carbon fiber, advanced aerodynamics, electronic controls, and a 6-liter V12. Ferrari's road cars were no longer merely funding the racing team. They were absorbing its technology, image, and authority. By 2004, the company that had seemed unstable after Enzo's death had become the most disciplined force in Formula One and one of the most powerful luxury brands in the world. Ferrari had finally learned how to win without its founder. And in doing so, it built an empire even Enzo had never controlled. Ferrari entered the post-Schumacher era with a question no machine could answer. Had the team learned to dominate, or had it simply depended on the people who were now leaving? Michael Schumacher retired from Formula One at the end of 2006. Ross Brawn stepped away. Rory Byrne's role diminished. The organization that had produced the most successful period in Ferrari history began to separate. Then Kimi Räikkönen arrived. The Finnish driver was quiet where Schumacher had been intense, instinctive where the previous system had been obsessive. He began the 2007 season with victory in Australia, but entered the final race in Brazil 7 points behind championship leader Lewis Hamilton. Räikkönen won. Hamilton finished 7th. By a single point, Ferrari had another world champion. The following season produced an even more painful ending. Felipe Massa won the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix in front of his home crowd. For several seconds, his family and the Ferrari garage believed he had become champion. Then, Hamilton gained the position he needed on the final corners of the final lap. Massa had lost the title by 1 point. Ferrari still won the Constructors' Championship, but it would become the company's last Formula One title for years. Fernando Alonso brought Ferrari close again. In 2010 and 2012, he entered the final race still capable of becoming champion. Both times the title escaped. Sebastian Vettel later challenged Mercedes during the hybrid era. Ferrari won races and briefly led the standings, but errors, reliability problems, and the strength of its rivals prevented another championship. The company's greatest contradiction had returned. Ferrari could build cars fast enough to inspire belief. It could not consistently complete the season. Away from Formula One, however, Ferrari was becoming more powerful than ever. The road car business had evolved into a global luxury system built around controlled production, personalization, limited editions, and access. Customers were not simply buying performance, they were buying entry into an institution that carefully decided how much of itself the world could possess. In October 2015, Ferrari shares began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. In January 2016, the company completed its separation from Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. Ferrari was now publicly traded, but unlike a conventional manufacturer, it could not chase unlimited volume without damaging the scarcity that created its value. Growth had to remain controlled. Technology created another challenge. For most of Ferrari's history, the engine had been almost sacred. Yet emissions rules, electrification, and changing markets demanded a new definition of performance. In 2013, LaFerrari became the company's first production hybrid. Its electric motor did not replace the V12, it intensified it. The SF90 Stradale went further in 2019, becoming Ferrari's first series production plug-in hybrid and combining a V8 with 3 electric motors. Then, in 2022, Ferrari unveiled the Puro Sangue, the first 4-door, 4-seat model in the company's history. To traditionalists, each step risked weakening the purity of the badge. Ferrari's answer was always the same. New technology would be accepted only if it made the car feel more like a Ferrari, not less. On the racetrack, the most emotional return happened outside Formula One. In 2023, Ferrari re-entered the top category of world endurance racing after 50 years with the 499P. At Le Mans, the company won on its first attempt back. It won again in 2024 and again in 2025. 3 consecutive overall victories restored Ferrari to the race where its international legend had been built decades earlier. Formula One remained more difficult. Charles Leclerc, a graduate of the Ferrari Driver Academy, became the emotional center of the modern team. In 2024, he finally won his home Grand Prix in Monaco, while Ferrari fought for the Constructors' Championship until the final race and finished second. Then the company made another historic signing. 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton joined Ferrari in 2025, forming one of the most famous driver pairings in the sport with Leclerc. The move carried enormous expectation, but expectation has always been Ferrari's heaviest burden. As of 2026, the team's last Drivers' Championship remains Raikkonen's title from 2007. Its last Constructors' Championship remains 2008. The drought has not made Ferrari irrelevant. It has made every new season feel like a judgment. That is the strange power of the prancing horse. Most companies are measured by profit, growth, or survival. Ferrari is measured against its own mythology, against Ascari, against Lauda, against Schumacher, against Enzo himself. The small racing operation created in Modena became a public company, a global luxury empire, a hybrid technology laboratory, and once again, a winner at Le Mans. Yet beneath the carbon fiber, software, sponsorships, and corporate structure, the original bargain remains unchanged. Ferrari sells road cars to protect the right to race. It races to make the road cars matter. And every time a red machine enters the circuit, the company must prove that the legend is still alive. Ferrari's story has never been only about cars. It is the story of a man who turned grief into competition, competition into identity, and identity into one of the most powerful symbols in the world. Enzo Ferrari did not build the largest company. He built the one people could recognize from a sound, a color, or a small black horse on a yellow shield. The company survived war, tragedy, political conflict, financial pressure, technical failure, and the death of its founder. It defeated giants. It was defeated by them. It abandoned Le Mans, returned half a century later, and won again. It dominated Formula One, lost its way, rebuilt itself, and discovered that even the greatest system cannot guarantee victory forever. That uncertainty is part of what keeps Ferrari alive. A Ferrari is not powerful because it is perfect. It is powerful because perfection always seems close enough to chase. Every generation inherits the same impossible task: protect the past without becoming trapped inside it. The V12 must survive new regulations. The racing team must carry history without being crushed by it. The road cars must become faster, cleaner, safer, and more advanced without losing the emotion that made people care in the first place. That is why Ferrari remains different. The company does not merely sell transportation, it sells tension between beauty and danger, between control and rebellion, between tradition and change. And every time the red cars line up on a starting grid, millions of people wait for the same answer. Is the legend still real? Ferrari has spent nearly 8 decades answering that question, not with words, with engines, with victories, with failures, and with the refusal to disappear. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Driven Empires, leave a comment with the Ferrari that means the most to you, and join us for the next story behind the machines, rivalries, and decisions that built the world's greatest automotive empires. Until next time.